I want to welcome you this evening to tonight's webinar in preparation for the NYSAIS Job Fair to Promote Diversity, to be held on Saturday, February 20th, 2021, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. virtually. That's right, you can be logged in as a registered candidate exploring professional opportunities in over 70 independent schools. The number is growing, and from the comfort of your home. So we invite you to please register and be part of this extraordinary opportunity. My name is Liz Fernandez. I have been the NYSAIS Job Fair Administrator for 21 years. And prior to that, I was also a candidate through the job fair and was able to secure employment at an independent school. And it was straight out of graduate school for me. And following that experience, it's become a career and a passion and given me a great deal of purpose to serve as an educator in an independent school. So I'm thrilled to welcome you, whether live or viewing this at your own leisure, to this evening's conversation with four dear, respected, and appreciated colleagues who have transitioned from the assistant or associate role to head teacher, either at the elementary level or in older grades, depending on their discipline and training. In a moment, I am going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, and then I have a series of questions that I will ask. Those of you that are joining us live, we will leave a little bit of time for your questions at the end. We ask that when you ask questions, you are succinct and ask more general questions that are specific to your individual needs or circumstances. I invite you to email me directly at jobfair@nysais.org. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our panelists to unmute, starting with Jean-Robert.
Hi, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be part of this. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Jean-Robert Andre. I am the Dean of Equity and Inclusion and a 5th grade science teacher at the Grace Church School. I use he, him pronouns. I have been in the role of Dean of Equity and Inclusion for 3 years. This is my 3rd year. I've been at Grace for 11 years. It's a pre-K through 12 co-ed independent school. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Maurice.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Maurice Hicks. I work at the Allen Stevenson School in the Upper East Side. I'm currently the 5th grade homeroom and multi-subject teacher. I'm a born and raised New Yorker, I have to say that, in the ways of Harlem world, respect. And this is my, I think, oh wow, 9th year teaching, and started out right after college. And I recently graduated from Hunter College with my master's in education, grades of 1 through 6. And these are some really interesting times. So I'm just glad that I can be here to hopefully share some knowledge and be able to still learn from everyone who I'm sharing this space with.
Thanks, Maurice. And please remind us, what kind of school is Allen Stevenson so that our audience understands the difference in independent schools?
Yes, thank you. Allen Stevenson is a K-8 boys school.
Thank you. Pier Angelo.
Thank you, Liz, and welcome everyone. I'm so happy to be here, honored to share my experience with this wonderful set of panelists. My name is Pier Angelo Rossi. I was born in Peru. I grew up there, and I moved to the US at the end of high school to attend college in the warm state of Minnesota. So after spending a few years there working for an educational nonprofit, I started my formal teaching career here in New York City at the Trinity School, where I still currently am teaching. This is going to be my 10th year at Trinity School. Time flies. Trinity School is a K-12 institution. It's co-ed. And I'm currently a grade 4 head teacher. This is my 8th year in the 4th grade, and I spent 2 years in the 3rd grade as an associate teacher, and 1 more year as an associate teacher in 4th grade. So that's where I made the switch from associate to head. and I, finished my master's at NYU in childhood education. Um, it's been, I would say, the journey of the educator, from my experience, has been positive, nurturing, and I'm excited to share some of my insight, my experience with everybody who is interested in making this transition.
Thank you so much. And Vanessa.
Thanks, Liz. Hi, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you. My name is Vanessa Digitio. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coordinator at the Ethical Culture School. It's my second year in that role, and prior to being a DEI coordinator, I was a classroom teacher. So I was at the school at Columbia University for 11 years, where I was an associate in kindergarten and third grade. Then I was a lead second grade teacher for 5 years and a lead seventh grade social studies teacher for 4 years. So I've just dipped my toes into the world of being an administrator, and I'm excited to share that perspective with you. Ethical Culture is part of a larger network of schools. So it's the Ethical Culture Fieldston School. So we have a sister elementary school, Fieldston Lower in Riverdale, and we also have Fieldston Middle and Upper. But Ethical Culture is a pre-K through fifth grade co-ed progressive school.
Thanks, everybody. And welcome once again. We're really glad. We're excited to hear about your stories. What made you consider independent schools? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and your experiences? I'm going to invite Maurice to go first, Angelo second, Jean-Robert third, and Vanessa, you'll go fourth. So in that order.
Right. I believe it started, well, I would say, but I think my parents would say something different, but I believe it started with my the first exposure to attending private schools in New York City. I went to public school from basically, kindergarten to fifth. And then I went to a small all boys Jesuit school in Harlem. And then at that point, it was a complete culture shift for me, and a lot of new things to learn, and not a lot of new ways to sometimes talk, to new ways to walk, new things that were accepted and not accepted in different ways. But I say that to mention that it was a very interesting time for me in terms of learning, something that I wasn't used to, living in Harlem at the time. As I continued to learn within that space, I had the opportunity to see different sides of not only myself, but other people. And that was something that I decided to take away with me, was that there was a lot more to experience, in the world. And I was very thankful that my parents were, able to give me that opportunity to, take a bus and a train just to get to school, even though at times it was very annoying to me. But at the same time, there was so much that was attached to if anything, just commuting. That was a part of the experience. But then once I, found my footing in the school, I was able to take away, bits and pieces of that. And then when it came time to become a professional, not only did I felt comfortable, within, specific spaces, but at the same time, I understood, specific challenges, and I was able to, and I wanted to be, around there, but also to, support. And this goes, I'm kind of skipping ahead, and I don't want to ramble at this point, but skipping ahead to the point of the purpose of why I teach, and it's attached to building community for for students, and also specifically for students who may come from a background like my own, but also have similar experiences in the diversity that I portray at really any point in time.
Thank you.
I think for me, the idea of being in the classroom and working with youth started in high school when back in Lima, I was part of some kind of pastoral mentoring group. And I think that was a very foundational experience for me, providing guidance for people. In this case, that was a more of a social emotional guidance, but applying to college in the United States was a big opportunity, getting a scholarship to attend a school in Minnesota. Shout out to Macalester College, by the way. I think the liberal arts education really helped me understand that there were a lot more opportunities for an international student like me out there to be more engaged in in social, in human development, right? And in particular, working with young people. So what really clicked the shift for me to go to independent schools, and I gotta say, I wasn't very familiar with independent schools when I first applied to this very job fair that that NYSAIS is about to host soon. And, at least you've been, organizing for years and years. I knew I wanted to be in New York City. I think at some point Minneapolis just felt a little too small. It felt a little too cold, and so because I think one of the easier transitions I heard was going through an independent school system that didn't have the rigidity of having certification prior to attending, prior to working there. So I remember, catching a flight to go to the job fair on that Saturday morning, and really being immersed in the world of possibilities. I had some friends who had told me a little bit about it just before, and it seemed like a great fit for me, who had a very eclectic background. I had worked with students, in a variety of backgrounds in the nonprofit I worked with, from 4th grade all the way to 9th grade. Worked with students who had plenty of possibilities and access and privilege. I had worked with students who, had very limited understanding of what the school path was ahead, who were not given the tools to succeed. I had worked with, deaf and hard of hearing students who had emotional and behavioral disabilities. So I just wanted, at some point, with so many students, I just wanted to have one classroom that I was responsible for. And my experience as an educator there, I think, was interesting to Trinity and to other schools that I talked to at the job fair, thinking that my journey as an educator, somebody who was a native Spanish speaker, spoke another language, somebody who was, I had at some point taught how to walk on stilts in a summer camp. So all of these different experiences that at first I thought, well, why would they care about that? That makes no sense, right? I haven't been in the classroom, teaching math. Like, somebody even doubted my credentials, but I think the advantage of independent schools is that they really see a myriad of experiences in candidates. So I thought that would be a great platform for me to begin my formal teaching career here, and I haven't regretted it ever since. And in particular, I think once I learned more about the independent school world, the support that we get institutionally, and to your point, Maurice, these being such challenging times for everybody, I think it goes without saying that the independent school world, while it has been hit with a fair share of challenges, I think that it's a reminder of how much support we can get as educators, compared to our colleagues in public schools, to which I have a lot of respect and love. So I think that idea of support, being able to have some kind of even tuition reimbursements for grad school, being able to go to different workshops and conferences, that I think cemented my decision and say, like, this is not going to be a temporary job for me. I do want to make a career in independent schools.
Thank you. Jean-Robert?
I feel very fortunate in my trajectory, in my career path. I'm a product of an independent school. I went to Dalton, commuted with my mom, who taught there until very recently, from Queens. And I was fortunate at the year that I graduated from college. Dalton had set up a fellows program where recent alums who were interested in teaching with little experience were able to sort of get a foot in the door. And I applied for that position when I was in my senior year of college, and landed in the first program, K-3 science classroom, which was where the fellows program was taking place for that year. It kind of switched around in different years. It was by far the most fun I've ever had in my entire life. And so that meant that I was kind of an assistant to the already existing structure. So I was sometimes the third or fourth person in the room. And that was really only a year-long position. So after that, I was able to apply for an associate position in the 4th grade, which was in the different campus. And that too was a very sort of illuminating and amazing experience that was also very different in the sense that we were 2 associate teachers for 5 head teachers. And so we were floating between classrooms. Each classroom was kind of its own universe with different teaching styles and different approaches to learning and teaching, which was, you know, an incredible learning opportunity for me. And I did that for 2 years. And then this job fair actually helped me find Grace Church School. And I was able to do a year in 4th grade there as an associate teacher before moving into having my own classroom. So I really wanted to have the experience of having that one classroom with one sort of mentor teacher and my own set of like 15 to 18 children that I could really connect with, and as well as their parents. And so yeah, it was kind of a long tenure of associate teaching before landing actually as a subject teacher. Was the first time that I had my own classroom teaching French and science to various grades.
Thank you. Vanessa.
The circumstances that led me to an independent school are a bit unconventional. So I need to backtrack a little bit. I did my undergrad at Barnard College and I did their education program. So, you know, as an undergrad, I was trained to be a lead classroom teacher. In public school, I was certified and I did my student teaching and I was ready to teach. All of my work up until that point had been in public schools. And the year that I graduated, there was a hiring freeze from the DOE on general elementary education teachers. And suddenly I found myself with limited options in terms of, you know, public schools, elementary schools, again, not being a special ed teacher, a general ed teacher, the opportunities that were out there. So I never, ever considered teaching in an independent school, but a close friend of mine who I did the education at Barnard program at Barnard with, she told me about the diversity hiring fair, Liz's hiring fair. And I was like, well, I don't want to teach an independent school, but I will go with you to kind of support you and kind of be your like wing woman and your backup as you navigate this job fair. I did bring a couple of copies of my resume. And, you know, as I started going around, you know, at the different tables and talking to different school representatives and just learning a little bit about, you know, the different schools that were out there, you know, I think my mindset kind of shifted and I became a little more open to potentially, you know, seeing this for myself. And I ended up at the School at Columbia's table. And something that really excited me about their particular mission and model was that their admissions model was 50% of the students who are admitted come from the surrounding public school districts around the school, and then 50% have some sort of a family affiliation or connection to Columbia University. So it's kind of like this public-private hybrid in my mind, this model. And it, you know, their mission was specifically rooted in inclusivity and social justice education, anti-bias education, and that's what was really driving me as an educator. I see education as a means for collective liberation and social transformation, and so I was really looking for a place that would mirror my purpose and intention in being an educator. And once I found out that they had an associate program, where also I'm going to give a shout out to tuition reimbursement. They offered grad school at TC as part of, at the time, as part of being an associate teacher. I jumped at the opportunity, and that's how I ended up at TSC, really believing in the mission, being excited about their admissions model, and also having access to grad school. You know, that was major for me, and I ended up loving that school. I had the most incredible mentor teacher my first year, and I immediately said, oh, this is a place where I can see myself long term, and that's why I was there for 11 years, and I have not yet left the independent school world.
Well, we're so glad that the job fair played such a significant role for some of you. That's really special and important. The impact of this job fair now in its 32nd year, you know, as we're hearing from all of you and so many others, is pretty significant. So thank you all for sharing your different journeys and pathways. And I think that's for those of you that are listening, it's really critical to understand that there really isn't one linear path to go from associate or assistant teacher to head teacher, whether it's in an elementary classroom or, as Jean Robert mentioned, in a subject specific classroom in the middle school, depending on how a grade, some schools classify fourth and fifth as part of a middle school. Some grades classify starting in fifth, some in sixth. So there's a variety of different ways, but the important thing is that the road isn't linear itself. I'd like to ask the panelists, beginning with Pierangelo, then Vanessa, Maurice, and ending with Jean Robert, what changed from being an associate or assistant teacher to being a head teacher? What responsibilities did you take on? What did you let go of? Like, tell us what the experience was.
Of course. I mean, everything changed. It's a big game changer in my experience and at Trinity School. In the upper elementary grades, you have usually 20 students and 2 teachers, one head, one lead head, and one associate. So I actually had quite an unusual associate teacher experience, in the sense that early on, my head teacher, John Evans, and eventually Julie Kurkulis, who were great mentors. That's not unusual. Everybody is a great mentor. But early on, there was a situation in which I had to be the de facto lead teacher for a couple of weeks because there was a family emergency with one of my head teachers, right? So I think early on, I was lucky that the principal saw in me someone who could take the pressure and work with the sub that was hired for those 2 weeks when the teacher was absent. I think the pressure obviously increased because as the associate teacher, I am usually CC'd on some parent emails. I have a cohort of students that I'm working with, maybe a reading group. I wrote a few reports for the midterm reports, but I definitely didn't handle the majority of the workload or the planning, the decision making, being accountable for all the communication with families, and so all of that all of a sudden increased. At the same time, I was promoted to a co-head teacher position. So that was a unique opportunity that appeared in that time, in which there were 2 of us who were being promoted from associates to head, and we were both placed in the same classroom. So in a way, it was a little unconventional because we were both sharing that pressure and responsibility. And I think that was a very special, but also supportive position to start in, right? But I think besides, just having more work to on your pile and thinking of, how are you going to make the best of everything, I think no matter what, just the pressure of being a first year head teacher is always there. No matter, what kind of mental health routine I did or anything like that. But at the same time, what was really cool, besides more workload and more pressure, one of the biggest advantages was that I was able to make decisions and really act upon them with a lot more frequency than as an associate teacher, where I had to adjust more to the pace and the ideas and kind of the style of my previous head teachers. So I think the capacity to create, envision, reimagine, take some things away. My co-teacher and I created this weekly class called Forum, where the kids were talking about current events, developing their own opinions. So that was, I think that gave me more purpose, and it also gave me that enthusiasm that balanced the obviously, the pressure of now being the point person, and not relying on your head teacher to take care of that difficult parent email or that interaction between 2 students that you gotta take care of at recess. So it came with both growth and also opportunity.
Thanks. Vanessa?
Yeah, when I think about making the jump from being an associate to being a lead, I think that, that jump, it's highly dependent on, the relationship that you have had with your mentor or lead teachers, right? Because, some mentor and lead teachers give their associate teachers a lot of space and agency in terms of planning curriculum implementing curriculum, taking the lead on certain projects, taking the kind of more of a co-lead in building that classroom community and culture, than others. So I think that's something that I experienced just even from my first to second year as an associate teacher, in terms of just the dynamic with my head teacher. And again, as someone who, I had been trained and prepared to be a lead classroom teacher based on my experience, I was someone who was like eager to step up and take on as much responsibility as I could. So, I tried to do that as much as possible as an associate teacher, which I think made my transition to being a lead teacher just a little bit better, just a little more manageable, because it is a lot where suddenly, you go from having your mentor and lead teacher who again takes the lead on parent communication, often on, again, setting the pace, like you said, Angelo, like for the classroom, figuring out what the curriculum looks like, to suddenly that's on you, right? You get to lead these decisions, right? And create the classroom community and culture that you envision, where you don't have to always mitigate that with someone else's vision. So I think that was a big shift. But I will also say that I was very lucky in my first year as a lead teacher to also have a co-teacher. So I was able to, have that collaborative relationship, again, similar to what I had with my mentor and lead teachers, where, we shared that responsibility in terms of curriculum development and creating our classroom community together. So again, I think that mitigated just some of the pressures of, being a first year lead teacher, because that is very real. As we know, your first few years in education, there's so much to figure out, the routines, right? Who you are as an educator, still you're figuring those things out in your early years. And I think that's something that doesn't stop, but as you get more experience, it gets a little bit easier from year to year once you've kind of established some of those basic routines and you're really like secure in your pedagogical framework or approach. So that's what, I would say, like, just that shift in terms of like agency and responsibility in taking the lead.
Thank you. I believe it was Maurice next.
Yeah. I guess I could start with, I think my shift came from just the entire concept of shifting as an associate teacher. I started out as a science associate, for 2 years, which was a wonderful experience. After that, I taught, in kindergarten for 2 years, and then did a year in second grade. And I give a lot of credit to the head teachers that I worked with, because it's everything that everyone has said so far related to the trust that they had in me, kind of throwing me into the fire, sometimes on purpose, sometimes, just by accident, not knowing that I may or may not have been ready, right? To be able to do it. But it was the whole point of also showing up, and I was willing to learn, and I wanted to be there, and I, wanted to, not only prove to myself, but prove to them that, I'm a team player. But at the same time, I feel confident, if they are not in the room, or if they need to step up for a bit, or if they need to make a phone call, if they're sick, right? It was the experience of just, and the repetition, I think, which became a habit for me, of asking for more, but then also being able to have that agency to create, was great at times. And I didn't share this, I actually worked in the same building with Angelo for those 5 years at Trinity School. He ended up being my mentor as well. So it's amazing that I get a chance to talk with, speak with him and share this particular space, which, we still talk today about all of that. But with all of that said, I took all of those experiences with me. And I was actually going from a place that had a lot of community attached to the planning and, things kind of already being set, and I have the support that's there, to not a school that doesn't have the support. I love Alan Stevens, I love my team, to just a new environment. We had a completely new curriculum. I'm the new kid on the block, right? People hear things, people don't hear things, people are trying to build, I'm trying to build the trust, I'm trying to build that community. So everything was actually amplified. But at the same time, I was ready for it because of, the different situations that I was placed in, whether it was damage control, whether it was, being able to just connect with this, the students, answering emails, stepping in when, the teacher, when we needed to expand the conversation, or, being able to also roll back a bit and give, someone their space as well to shine, right? And to share that, share that space as well. So one of the biggest things in terms of the jump for me was the fact that I was on my own, and I had to, I had to figure everything out in a short amount of time. But it was about really synthesizing and taking it all in, and then and applying it where it needs to be, and realizing that I didn't need to do it all at the same time. I needed to just trust the process that's, that I'm going with, but then also do what people did for me, which is at that point, reach out and seek that assistance, whenever it came my way. But then at the same time, find my footing. And I think it's important to, tap into everything that you experienced in those years, prior to that, because it's everything that has, led you to that point. And once you get into that, position that, you're there, right? And you're there for a reason. People said yes to you, but at the same time, you said yes to yourself. So a lot of it was, accepting myself for who I am and appreciating it. And then at that point, really just kind of, playing ball, if I can say that, just being able to play ball and, make it happen.
Thank you so much. Jean-Robert?
Yeah, so I echo everything that was said. I think the biggest shift is not only responsibility, especially when it comes to fielding parent emails and parent interactions, making decisions in the class, but it's also about autonomy. And certain schools are more let you in the classroom be more autonomous than other schools, perhaps. But there is a freedom to that, which is really wonderful. By the time I moved into having my own classroom, I had worked with 7 head teachers by that time. So just by nature of the way that the associate programs had worked. And so the thing that I that really helped the most is just like, I pretended I was a sponge and just like absorbed everything that I could get from the people that I worked with in the years prior. It really informed a lot of my teaching, and it helped me to sort of figure out what was me and what was them and what I needed, and what I thought would be successful in if I had my own space. And so being able to take advantage of the flexibility of an associate or assistant teacher position, in the sense that you have this mentor next to you every day in the same classroom, that you can ask questions to, that you can learn from, that you can get feedback from, and then just being able to sort of carve out the space that you need whenever you're ready to take on more and more responsibility, so that when you move into that head position, you have the practice within that safe space of your assistant and associate classroom, that you can then apply when you're a head teacher. Yeah, so that's what I felt really helped. And then I think also the transition, while we all still have mentors, I think that the transition from like working with a mentor, supervisor kind of person who can lead and guide you, to then seeking out as a head teacher, then you seek out colleagues and peers, and people who are thought partners and you can bounce ideas off of. And so that kind of shift too, is really important for creating the supportive space. It's a lot kind of more on your shoulders to figure out like how to get what you need as support.
Thank you all so much. So this is an open question for any of you to answer. I'd love for at least 2 of you, but we don't need all 4. Some of you have already touched base in response to this question. How does a candidate know they're ready to make that transition? How did you know? Now, in some cases, Jean-Robert, you had 7 different experiences with different, associate positions. So at some point you were probably like, okay, like really, I'm good.
Yeah.
But, how about the rest of you? How did you know? And how do you, the candidates that are viewing this, the candidates that have joined us, how do they know? What should they be looking for? What are your thoughts?
I can share something that was real and it really hit. I just waking up one morning and I taught a bunch of lessons. The head teacher was out for some time for some personal circumstances, and I woke up one day, feeling great, but at the same time I felt something in my heart, and the first words that I said is that I'm ready to go. Like I am ready to leave. I'm ready to make the jump. Before that, I didn't look online or ask people about positions at all. This was, by the end of nearing the end of my career over at Trinity School. But it was the culmination of, the ups and downs, and, being excited about it, not talking to anyone, but something hit inside of my heart and really like gave me a little bit of a headache right when I woke up, that said, I think it's time for you to, really think about what your next steps actually are. And that was the mindset that I took with me for the remainder of the year. So everything that I did, was attached to trying to find specific placement, but at the same time trying to master specific crafts, and dedicating, that year towards mastery as well. Making sure that, I had, as one, say that your, eyes crossed T's, but making sure that I'm revising and I'm editing and I'm revising and I'm editing. And because I had that feeling, it didn't seem so taxing, and it wasn't a burden for me, because I really felt it. And it was something that, at that point now, I'm also telling people, I'm speaking, I'm talking to them about it. They're telling me to stop talking about, wanting to, look for places, or, who is, or that school's not looking for someone right now, or, or, here's their number, or here's their email. And I'm, bugging people, but it was really a feeling for sure. And something that I don't think I'll ever forget, because it moved me for sure, and it pushed me in the right direction.
And we're so glad for it, Maurice. Thank you so much. Anybody else want to respond to how does a candidate know they're ready? How did you know you were ready?
Well, something I would like to offer is that I think for me, being with the kids always felt good. So, standing up there, guiding, whether it was a spelling lesson or social studies or math, however long or however frequent that time was, I knew that when I was there, it helped me to think, well, my contract says associate teacher, but in this moment, when I'm leading the lesson, I'm the leading teacher for 40 minutes, for an hour, for 25. So, but I think the big shift happened when I realized, it's beyond this, of course. It's curriculum design, it's communication with parents, it's supporting my team, it's offering ideas to my administrators. Once I realized, I also see my role in all these responsibilities in this school, that idea of belonging and seeing yourself there is really important. And I think, in the context of the diversity job fair, I cannot emphasize how important it is that, we as people of color working in predominantly white spaces must understand that at some point we might feel that, what is it called? Like imposter syndrome of like, maybe it's not me, like it's not my world, right? You look at the families, look at the kids, look at, their hobbies, their pastimes, like, and you're like, but that's not me, that was not my story. But I think having mentors who told me like, that's just, that's the optics, that's the system, but like you have a place here because your story matters. In fact, our schools definitely benefit from our stories, being in that space. So for anyone listening out there, now or later, recorded, like that is important. And something that also clicked for me was that, you know what? I should not compare my potential first year as a head teacher with all these super experienced, amazing teachers. So that's not fair. So that allowed me to let go of that pressure and think like, you know what? I'm going to be assessed as a first year head teacher, not as a 5 or 10-year head teacher. So I think managing expectations helped me say, you know what? I'm going to go for it. There's going to be an opening, whether at Trinity or another school, and I'm going to go for it. And I think that gave me that mental and emotional peace of mind to say like, it will be okay. Like, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to, have lessons that are not great or inspiring, but so does everybody else. But we're still making this work every day. But because I care about the kids, I care about the craft, the passion, I'm going to be okay.
Excellent words of wisdom, you all. I'm so glad to hear you bring up imposter syndrome and to remind everyone, the voices that we hear that cast doubt for whatever reason can really play a number. And those are the same voices that some of our students, some of our families, some of our colleagues across a variety of identifiers also experience. And the reality is that our independent schools really exist primarily to educate and provide extraordinary opportunities to young people to help them become, lifelong learners. We hear that all the time, and to be inquisitive and critical thinkers, and to really be problem solvers. And if anything, there's never been a moment in the world where we have needed more problem solvers than right now, to be able to bridge gaps and to build community and to understand our shared humanity as we're battling the pandemic based on COVID-19, and also the systemic racism that continues to be ever present. And so we've all got work to do, and there are always places for us to step into and to silence that voice and to step into our glory and into our leadership, because for some children, you are their universe. You are the person that is inspiring them to silence that voice. And so I think it's a cycle, and it's an incredible opportunity. I'm going to ask Vanessa to start, and then if others have something to add, it would be really helpful if candidates could hear what can candidates expect from the hiring process at this moment. And I want to frame this. Each school is doing something perhaps a little bit different. Some schools are bringing candidates physically in, as long as they can maintain social distancing and certain safety standards and protocols in schools. Other schools are not at all. Everything's happening remote during the hiring process. So regardless of the kind of school that you pursue interviewing, just be prepared for any options. What can candidates expect at this moment? Vanessa?
Thanks, Liz. So in my current role, I'm actually on every hiring committee that my school has. So I was someone who was never really heavily involved in the hiring process, like when I was a teacher. So it's been really fascinating to be on the other side, to now see, all of the work and thought and labor that goes into a hiring process. And so, again, I think we're under really challenging circumstances now, with the pandemic, with COVID, but just some things to anticipate is, the usual in terms of, what we're really looking for as we look through, applications, is to really get a sense of like who you are as an educator, a very compelling sense. And, obviously the best way to do that is to be really intentional in what it is that you're bringing to your cover letter. So not just, of course, like sharing who you are, your philosophy, what it is that you bring, but also showing that you've done your research and you've done your homework about the school that you are applying to, in terms of the mission, the programming, the structures and supports that are in place. And so I'd say that's something to anticipate, is like right now, if you are embarking on a search, if you're in the middle of a search, like really, taking time to do that research into the particular institutions to see if this is a place where you see yourself thriving and growing in. Because as much as, you're probably thinking like, I want, this place to accept me, it's also you're going to accept this place. And so you're looking for a place that, again, is going to have the supports that you feel like you need and want, whether that's professional development, whether it's more of a collaborative team model, right? Like there are certain things that you have to decide for yourself that are critical for you, as an educator, things that you think are most important in making that decision of where you might apply and see yourself. So, the cover letter, and then also, with the interview process, the same thing. I think it's really, practicing. I remember when I applied, being an associate to making that jump to being a lead, and then also going from being a lead teacher to being, an administrator. I tapped into all of my mentors, all of my networks, the people who have supported me from day one, who I'm just so grateful to for their constant support, guidance, and love. And I I utilize those connections and those people who saw something and things in me that I didn't often even see in myself. And again, that speaks to that imposter syndrome of like, yes, you're ready for this. Any school would be, thrilled to have your talents and your gifts and your strengths. So tapping into those people and doing run-throughs when it comes to possible interview questions, thinking about how you will articulate your philosophy of education, to a hiring committee. I think those are some things to anticipate. And then of course the demo lesson. So, when it comes to the demo lesson, like my biggest piece of advice is, you want a demo lesson that's going to show who you are as an educator and what you believe in, that will distinguish you from a million other potential lessons they could see on literacy or math or social studies. But what is that particular area of passion and purpose that you bring to teaching? How will you showcase that through your demo lesson? So I'll just speak from my experience. For me, as I shared before, social justice and DEIJ has always been the foundation of my pedagogy as an educator. So every demo lesson I've ever done, that was front and center in terms of how I was thinking about approaching this lesson, how I was trying to cultivate, a moment in time relationship with students who are not my own, students, that all of that was informing that process. And it's, very visibly reflected in both the what it was that I was teaching into and the how, behind how I was teaching into that in my demo. So I think those pieces are just for me the most critical parts of the hiring process to just think about and be really purposeful around.
Anyone else want to add to Vanessa's awesome overview? Thank you so much, Vanessa. Anything else that comes to mind that you all have noticed or that you would want to advise?
Yeah, I can say a few more. Yes, I echo everything that Vanessa said. That and I would say, prepare to meet a lot of people. Have some water. You're going to be talking a lot, and that's good because we want you to be exposed to as many people as possible who may be on your team, or if there are many positions open, being able to know which one is best suited for you, which one is most needed, and I think as someone who is interviewing people, in my current position, I really appreciate when candidates ask questions of the school, because it also not only does it show that you've done your research. If you ask questions about the school, every school, you can think about it like every school has a personality, and so being able to understand what is at the core of this particular school's mission, what are their priorities this year, and a lot of that you can get from the website, or just talking to people. But being able to talk about our school to someone is really exciting, and being able to learn about what the candidates' priorities are and what they're looking for in a school. We are as much being interviewed as you are, right, when you're coming to visit the school. And so it's really important that we get a sense of each other. So I would say that that's something that sticks out for me.
That's terrific. As we transition to the final question, I just want to remind everyone who's viewing and who's in an assistant or associate teaching position, one of the best pieces of professional development that you can experience is also being part of your school's hiring process at this moment, so that you understand how people are approaching the hiring experience, assessing candidates, how they're reading resumes, how they're commenting, how are they setting up rubrics to review and reflect on someone's teaching demo. Why do people meet with different members of the community? As Jean-Robert said, you will meet with lots and lots of people. So in preparation for your own process, being part of a process when you have the opportunity and you're invited to volunteer is an excellent way to get the inside scoop to better understand the independent school hiring process for any position. So, that's something that I just wanted to share with everybody. The final question that I have for our panelists, in 1 to 2 sentences, other than the children, other than our students, other than the amazing young people that we get to work with on a daily basis. So let's take that as givens. What keeps you in these schools? And I'm going to invite Maurice to go first, Pierangelo second, Vanessa third, and Jean-Robert fourth.
For me, it's all about core values, receiving and breaking them down. A lot of defining what these core values mean as a person who stands in front of students, but also shares spaces with adults. I think it's important for us to continue to define what really keeps us together, really what holds schools together, but also what holds us as individuals together, which is hopefully those core values, being able to share those with other people, but at the same time, hopefully living up to those core values. And it's also the challenge that's attached to it too. Trying to instill new core values, right? And then try to take some out, right? Remove them as well, and then redefine them, reshape them. It is sometimes messy, but it's necessary. And that's a lot of why I continue to show up, because I have received those core values, but I also have been able to pass them on, and then also try to transform them into something that is better off than it was left.
Thank you so much, Maurice. Pierangelo, how about you? 1 to 2 sentences. How'd you respond to that question?
I would say community and mission/purpose. Community, I think in the 10 years I've been there, I've met phenomenal colleagues and people who I'm lucky to call friends. So building something together that is bigger than your classroom is really special. And getting the tools and support to do it is what really keeps me going. And that ties to mission and purpose, because as we know, independent schools are grappling more than ever with what it means to be an inclusive, equitable institution that fosters the values that we read on the website, right? How do we truly show that in our hiring, retention, curriculum, teaching, alumni relations, in all of these areas? How are we truly living those values? And I think this is an incredible, what happened, last year with certain schools and in the country in general, I think has really awakened a lot of school leaders and thinking like, how can we do this more intentionally and do it better for a better lasting, a better legacy, right? So I think this is a very momentous time, and that I'm passionate about living and being in the school during this time, and working towards that.
Thank you. Vanessa, how about for you?
I think for me, it's thinking about, the world that we live in, and it's a calling, it's a call to action. It's this idea that, we have always had freedom dreamers and freedom fighters who have imagined and tried to collectively work towards a better, more just world. And education is at the heart of that work. It's at the heart of the individual work that we all need to do and be a part of, and then this collective work. So that's that for me. It's that holding on to that vision and constantly working towards that.
Thank you. Jean-Robert, how about for you?
I would say the mission as well. I think the mission of our schools is kind of like a scaffold. And the school itself is an experiment, right, on how well we can embody that mission. And so we're in a constant state of learning to be better, in a constant state of doing better. And especially when it comes to the DEI work, how do we do anti-racism in a predominantly white institution? That is the question. And so we are constantly trying to figure out new ways to do that. And because our schools have, they do have a lot of resources. And so each of us is really pushed to, encouraged to get better ourselves, right? Seek out that professional development, uplift the others around us, and learn how to take advantage of the communities that we are operating in, so that we can grow and learn as professionals together. So I appreciate that about our communities.
Thank you so much. So we have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions from those of you that are live. As a reminder, we ask you, if you have specific questions about your own individual circumstances, I welcome the opportunity to follow up with you via email at jobfair@nysais.org. If you have a general question that you would love to either direct at a particular panelist or to the panelists to see who might respond, please unmute yourself so that we can hear your question, or please place the question in the chat, and I'll ask the question of the panelists if there are any questions.
I have a question. I guess what would be one question that you would ask in the hiring process um, of an associate teacher? You know, what's like a common question that you ask when they're interviewing for a head teacher position?
Great question. Who would like to start with a response? Good.
I can start. So, having that perspective of being, the DEI person, I'm always going to push for questions that really tap into, a candidate's both personal and professional journey when it comes to DEIJ work. So what I want to know is, what do these concepts mean to you? How do you define them? How does this define your work or inform the work that you do with children, with families, with a school community? So I'm always going to, center those sorts of questions. How have you navigated a conflict when you've caused harm? I want to know about like your personal accountability, and what, how have you reflected on those moments of, again, of like learning, growth, and how can you repair harm that was done if, let's say, you did or said something, right, that that really hurt someone. So yeah, I think, again, it's both the professional and the personal journey when it comes to DEIJ.
Thanks, Vanessa. DEIJ, just in case, because one of the things that happens in independent schools, and we speak in acronyms and acrostics all the time. So just in case, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, DEIJ. Anyone else want to add to the response, or do you feel Vanessa covered? Up to you.
I would just like to say to even with what you just said, to remove ourselves from speaking in constructs, but also to, have the interviewer, hopefully the interviewer can define, their constructs, but then also at the same time, you can highlight, and explain and elaborate on the constructs that we use within, that time that we're being interviewed as well. I find it highly valuable when someone, kind of divots a bit to break down what they were trying to say, or what or what it truly means to them, because it shows that, hopefully it does show that they might have done their research, but at the same time, this is something that they're coming forward with in terms of their lessons, but also, hopefully, in terms of their personality and what their makeup is as well. So a lot of just attached to the terminology that we use, and in support of what you just said, Liz, but also Vanessa. So thank you.
Thank you. One last suggestion that I would say is, depending on the kind of school that you've served as an assistant or associate teacher, if you're applying to a school that is considered different, so if you're going from a school that's more of a traditional or progressive to a different, or if you're going from what are, and as we evolve with language, single sex, co-ed, all gender, single gender, multi-gender, just think about how you want to be an educator that supports all of the children at the school that you're working, differentiated learning styles, making sure that you continue to grow and evolve, as was referenced earlier, making sure you're continuing to do your own professional development. What are some of the things that you're passionate about at this moment? Why did you want to enter into teaching? Why are you interested in stepping in? What's a time that you've dealt with a really challenging situation with a parent, with a colleague, as was mentioned? Those are the kinds of questions. I just want to close with a couple of tidbits, just some reminders. And then, of course, I will end with thanking this amazing group of colleagues. I want you all to remember that positions like teaching fellows, and it was also referenced earlier this evening, professional development funds for tuition reimbursement. There are amazing growth opportunities. We would love to continue to invest in the teaching profession, and that is one of the things that independent schools do very, very well. So if you're curious about what some of those programs are and those opportunities are and how to explore them, I can also support you with that. So jobfair@NYSAIS.org. I want to encourage you not to just wait for the job fair on February 20th. Please make sure you look at school websites now. Schools are starting to post positions that are available. I also want to encourage you to visit the NYSAIS website and click on careers and have a sense of the different kinds of schools that exist and the different opportunities the schools also post there. And finally, before I thank our team, I just want to recognize that many colleagues of color have successfully navigated this transition from being assistant or associate teachers or teaching fellows into positions where they are now in the lead role and in the opportunity to have a more creative leadership and authority in the curriculum, in the direction, et cetera. And I just want to remind you, it's all possible. And you have so many people who will support you at different phases and stages. So we encourage you to think and to know you are ready. I want to thank Jean-Robert, Maurice, Pierangelo, and Vanessa for your time. You are an exceptionally talented group of colleagues, and we are so lucky to have you within our schools. So thank you for this evening. Thank you to everybody who's joined us and who's viewed. And I want to recognize George Swain from NYSAIS. Thank you for your behind the scenes background. Good luck, everybody. We look forward to seeing you at the next event.